So I want to start off by confessing something. The title for this series of videos isn't entirely accurate anymore. When I first started Guilty Pleasure Treasure, I had the intention of focusing primarily just on movies or other media that I knew objectively weren't that great or, treading into terrible, but I still found some degree of satisfaction or enjoyment from them. Again, that's so bad it's good focus. But as time went on, I realized that I really wanted to discuss films that I genuinely believe to be good films that just never really got their fair shake. So the series eventually branched out to incorporate some movies that I've covered here before, such as A Scanner Darkly or The Navigator, that objectively, I think are really well put together films, and you know what? You can derive a great deal of entertainment and some deep thematical resonance from. And while I'm going to try my best to try and maintain focus of the series on more of the so bad it's good fare, every once in a while you're gonna have a movie that slips in here that is a fine enough film. That all being said, let's continue some Fordsgiving with another movie that I feel never got its proper due, but if you look back on it now, actually serves the purpose it was intended very well, very efficiently, and is a bit of compelling filmmaking. That would be 2011's Cowboys and Aliens. When you hear that title, Cowboys and Aliens, your mind automatically sets itself up for some sort of self-aware silliness. If the movie had been titled anything else, I guarantee you it probably wouldn't have gotten such a broad stroke of pannings or mixed reviews, and the audience might have actually turned up just on the merits of the film alone, as opposed to a title that failed to deliver on the pure, unadulterated goofiness that it promised. When you have a title that can work on a couple of different levels and still be compelling enough to draw you in as a viewer, then great. A title like Cowboys and Aliens is ultimately setting you up for Sharknado-style fare, where it is going to go for all-out type of pandering and fan service, and again, that self-aware kind of meta humor. That's not what Cowboys and Aliens is. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not familiar with the source material, which is the 2006 graphic novel from Platinum Studios, although I understand there are significant changes between film and book. In the original graphic novel, it's my understanding that the aliens that invade and cause havoc for our main characters aren't nearly as faceless as the film portrays them to be. You actually have some developed characters on both sides, and it's a little bit more of a complex, almost Warcraftian factioning that goes on throughout the story as you discover that there are allegiances swapped and things of that nature. That's really not on display in the film adaptation. It's much more streamlined. I think that serves the story better for a mainstream audience. And again, if you go into this movie not expecting pandering, not expecting meta humor or that self-aware type of angle, it can present itself as a pretty compelling Western crossed with science fiction and mystery. Director Jon Favreau, who's brought us things such as Iron Man and a slew of those Disney live-action remakes, and believe me, I have words about those. Just wait. He went on the record as saying he wanted to capture the essence of both the Western genre and science fiction that is a little bit more, let's say, nebulous with regards to its intent. He cited classic Westerns directed by people such as John Ford or Sergio Leone as being the primary influence for the direction he wanted to take with the film, and even attributed the sci-fi aspect of the movie to earlier fares such as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where it's a little bit more, like I said, murky with regards to what exactly is going on. You get an idea as time goes by, but you're not given the full backstory, which I think a lot of the audience was aggravated at when this movie first arrived. A lot of criticism I found myself kind of hearing about was, well, the motivations for the aliens don't make sense. That's not really the intent of the film to begin with. You're supposed to be viewing this from the perspective of these folks living out west who just discovered kind of the crux of modern society with the railroads. But for me, it works really well because from shot one, I am viewing it directly from the perspective of the main character called Jake Lonergan, played by Daniel Craig. definitely feeds into the trope of that man with no name comes into town and trouble starts a brewing, certainly, but there is a fair degree of good mystery surrounding him. Not only do we discover who he really is and where he came from, but also a compelling motivation as to why he continues to fight onwards against these new threats. As he discovers more of his memory and more of why he is in the predicament he's in, you do garner a little bit of sympathy about him. And I think Daniel Craig does that very effectively here. Even though it is kind of his late Bond phase where he's clearly on I don't give a crap mode and stuff like Spectre, here it works though. He seems to be investing quite a bit more into this character and his motivations because maybe there's just a little bit more going on for a guy who has pretty much next to no memory of where he's from or who he is.
You want to watch where you point that thing before you get hurt.
I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt because maybe you don't know who I am.
And again, the story itself with regards to the human characters isn't necessarily the most complex or probably the most enthralling type of story you would expect in a Western epic, but it's enough to kind of be able to service this crossbreed of two genres. You got the signposts of a classic Western all there and all done pretty efficiently, and as efficiently as it needs to be done in order for it to effectively work well off of the alien aspect. Like I said, you have the man with no name, you have the somewhat villainous rancher, you have the supporting characters, all with their own unique quirks and backstories that service the plot well enough, such as the priest, who's very supportive, such as the bartender slash doctor, who has his own insecurities he needs to wrestle with. You have all the basic hits of a Western, the last ride, the posse gathering up, the backstabbing and betrayals, even a touch of spirituality with regards to one of the characters and his Native American heritage. And propelling all of that is a force that we're not meant to fully comprehend. The aliens invading this town, harvesting people for their own diabolical purposes that are never fully explored, but it's menacing and eerie enough that you want them to rescue their folks. Effects-wise, it's very competent. Action sequence-wise, it is really compelling. I'm glad to see that they actually film on locations for the most part instead of in a 9-foot by 9-foot green screen area. To watch actual actors riding actual live horses across an actual field or on top of a mesa is something of a rarity in films these days. No one is sleepwalking through this endeavor either. Daniel Craig is playing the stoic straight man to all the shenanigans, but he can get intense and somewhat humorous when he needs to.
You're always my favorite.
Shut up.
Damn it. Jake, did you break my tooth?
Would you shut up? I'm thinking.
Olivia Wilde plays up the femme fatale lady of mystery very much, and as more is revealed about her character, it makes a lot more sense.
I need you.
You got something to say. Say it.
I need to know where you came from.
So do I.
The supporting cast, like I said, is really phenomenal. Sam Rockwell, injecting as much life into his character of the doctor slash bartender who just wants to rescue his wife.
You gonna be like this the whole trip? Because if you are, we ain't gonna have too many long conversations, are we? Let's just sing a song or something. Cook some beans, do something useful.
The last guy in the West trying to retain some degree of civility, who's never held a gun in his life and is kind of off-put by violence to begin with, gets instruction from, of all people, the Kurgan, Clancy Brown, as the preacher.
You get her back. You're setting things right. Just gotta have faith, that's all.
Faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, God's been real swell to me. I don't mean no disrespect, preacher, but either he ain't up there or he don't like me very much.
Well, surely you don't expect the Lord to do everything for you, do you, Doc?
And I really like him in that role. He plays a very solid moral foundation for the posse, and especially for Daniel Craig's character, who is a little morally ambiguous. And I know you're all here primarily for what I think about Harrison Ford in this role as Colonel Dollarhide.
Nobody calls me Colonel.
Honestly, this is one of those Ford roles in the 2000s that I genuinely believe he cares about. Something tells me he gets a kick out of playing a bit more of an obvious bastard. And Colonel Dollarhide is certainly that in the beginning of this film. His entrance, his introduction, while he's interrogating one of the men he thinks has kind of screwed up or betrayed him to some degree, is pretty intimidating.
Been drinking, ain't you? I can smell it on you.
have been drinking. Yes, sir, Brother Tuesday drinking.
What kind of a man goes around blowing up other people's cows and tells a bullshit story like this?
And more is established about his character as time goes on, such as the very tense relationship he shares between not just his blood son, Paul Dano, but also with his sort of adopted son, who he kind of pushes to the side in favor of his blood son, who's played by Adam Beach.
I remember those stories.
I don't recollect telling you any stories.
I'd listen when you tell them to Percy.
You get this through your thick Indian skull. Them stories weren't for you.
His relationship with Harrison Ford as Dollar Hyde is one of the more complex and more emotionally investing moments in the movie.
And you took him in when he was only a boy. But you gave him purpose.
There you go.
Taught him how to take care of himself. Even though you were not blood.
And out of all the characters, he gets the most fulfilling arc throughout the movie. And I don't think the critics and audiences who were around when this movie first came out were ready to invest in a serious blend of sci-fi and western. I think a lot of people were ready to just waltz right in and have a righteous laugh at the movie's expense, but Jon Favreau, I feel, does a really good job balancing both genres, giving each one its proper due and in the proper light. The aliens aren't too complex, nor are their motivations, and that's fine because you're seeing them from the perspective of an everyman person living on the western frontier. Objectively, it is a gorgeous looking film. It is shot beautifully. I think that is, again, supported really well by the fact that a lot of it takes place on actual locations. The acting for what this film needs to be, kind of paying homage to both classic sci-fi and classic westerns, is really well done. Everyone's investing appropriately. It's simple and straightforward enough and accessible enough. Are there better westerns out there? Sure. Are there better sci-fi movies out there? Absolutely. Are there better western sci-fi crossbreeds? Shiny. But Cowboys and Aliens, I consider to be one of those movies that got really shafted by its marketing and by a little bit of some displacement with regards to what people were expecting or anticipating at the time. Going back to the Sharknado comparison, no one goes into that movie with that title thinking, oh, I wonder what kind of serious, compelling drama is going to come out of this ordeal. Now, there is another movie that came out around the same time as Cowboys and Aliens, a little bit after Cowboys and Aliens, that kind of takes this idea of, hey, the title says it all, and tries to go with a more serious, slanted angle to its content, but I feel falls way short of what Cowboys and Aliens was able to do. This movie knows exactly what it wants to get across, titles be damned, and yeah, Harrison Ford, without a doubt, is one of the highlights of this movie. I've still got a couple of Fordsgiving things coming your way before this month is up, I promise. Stay tuned.
Kill the whore.
I told you not to call her that.